Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Common Room. For the last two sessions, Matt and Andrew got to pick the subject, and today I did. Today I wanted to talk about the love languages. So these are the 5 love languages taught by Dr. Gary Chapman, which are works of service, quality time, physical touch, words of affirmation, and gifts. And Dr. Chapman's main point is that we each give and receive love differently. So if you've ever been in a relationship where you think you are killing it, you're just doing everything. It's like, oh, I bought her so many gifts. I'm so affirming. And then you realize that you're actually not fulfilling them, that they're not feeling loved by you. And Dr. Chapman says this is probably because you're not communicating in their particular love language. So in this case, it might have been physical touch, it might have been quality time. And if you weren't fulfilling that love tank, as he calls it, that person isn't receiving the love that you're giving them. And it's incredibly frustrating, particularly if you end up marrying somebody who has very different love languages from you, but it helps you grow as a person. So with that background, I'll include some links to the 5 Love Languages website if you want to learn a little bit more about it. But I really want to just use that as a jumping off point to talk about the love languages themselves and to see what we think Lewis might make of them, or how the different love languages perhaps interact with the different kinds of loves that we've spoken about in the 4 loves. Gentlemen, thoughts?
Sorry, I was looking at the 5 love languages just to remind myself. Matt, what about
you? Let's start by finding out what your love languages are. Matt.
I was going to say, let's build this towards what we think Lewis and connecting to 4 loves, but let's start at more the secular surface level. So, I mean, my first interaction with them was after college, and I really enjoyed learning about them. I thought they told me a lot about myself, and it really made a lot of sense, and it's helped me in my friendships be able to better understand when I'm being loved, when I'm not being loved, by understanding my friends and what their love languages are. So mine are words of affirmation and quality time. And so
you did that really well. Excellent. I'm really glad that we spent this.
Thank you so much, David.
That's the best answer I could think of anybody ever giving. In fact, I just want to sit here and enjoy your presence in having given such a great answer.
Thank you, guys. This is great. This is actually, relating to this to David and I, because David and I do have actually quite different personalities in terms of like styles of doing this podcast. In the first season, I would say it took me a bit of time because David is a little bit more critical, and just call it is. It's not a negative. You just your high standards, and
that's why things are so good.
It really is. And I constantly felt in the beginning a little bit inadequate, like I'm just constantly falling short. And eventually that does get a little bit tiring. And I shifted my mindset to understand with David, I don't actually know if quality time is one of yours, but like the fact that I was still on it with you, ironically, like I had to shift the way that you signal your appreciation or your love was like the continuing and moving forward. Like I recognize that you actually did appreciate me on it, despite even if I thought I did an episode well, David would find the 2 things I didn't do well. And I'd be like, oh man, I'm just falling so short right now. And it was the shift. And I know this is a little bit different in love language, but it's that idea that I eventually realized that isn't how you're communicating love. To me, as an affirmation person, I'm receiving it as like disaffirming. And I had to recognize you were not disaffirming me at all. And or maybe not at all, but not completely.
Negating.
Thank you.
It's funny. It reminds me of a performance review I had at my first company here in the States, because they didn't really do them. And so I went to my boss and said, am I going to have a performance review? He said, have we fired you? He went, no. I said, then you're doing great.
Exactly. Honestly, that's what I started realizing in the beginning. I was like, hey, somehow he still wants me to show up every single week at his bedroom with the ironing board and a glass of scotch, and we're still recording. So I must be doing something right.
It's that old joke about the wife who complains to her husband. She said, do you love me, honey? He said, did I tell you when we got married that I loved you? She said, yeah. She said, but it's been 50 years since you said anything. He said, well, nothing has changed. Right? But her love language was words of affirmation, right? So, and the fact that he would take the time to consider what you did and then take the time to think about how to communicate a way that would be easy for you to improve it was quality time, I think, for David, and an act of service, right? And showing
Which are
that
my
you
two. Active
Really?
service is number one, and then quality time is after that.
Oh my gosh. And that explains why, listeners, when we get the notes, very often mine are just blank, mostly because I think I know what I'm going to say. That plus a little scotch usually covereth over a multitude of sins, or spawns them. But David spends hours kind of putting everything together and having all these notes and these thoughtful pieces. And it's a way that he can tell us and tell the Lord, I think, and tell you listeners that he cares, because he's going to put in that time. And that's part of why the podcast, if it has any strength or quality, it's because David's speaking, pouring his love languages into this thing. So,
And if I am humble at all, and I am,
we all are. Should we do our humility?
cheers.
Cheers. We should have a discussion one of these days about which of us is the most humble.
Oh, that would be great. I'm totally going to win.
I'll bow out.
But you were saying
Old pride.
So we've heard Matt's love languages. We've heard mine. What are yours, Andrew? What do you think?
I love receiving gifts, and physical touch. Some of that's just I think being a guy. Words of affirmation. Those go a lot. What did Mark Twain say? I could go 3 months on a good compliment. So I think probably words of affirmation, receiving gifts, are high up there for me, although I appreciate all of those.
I've known words of affirmation was for you, and knowing the journey I went through with knowing that David, it's not that high for. I was like, I think I need to affirm Andrew. I think I need to affirm Andrew a little bit more, because I was like, I know Andrew's going through the same period, adaptment and adjustment. I was like, I got to make sure I'm reaffirming him.
Well, and I honestly didn't know after the first season whether I'd be invited back. I don't know if I'll be invited back next season, but I think that we're onto something here. One of the things I recognized, and Kristen and I have talked about, is that the love languages I like to receive are not necessarily her love languages, but then there's a third component in a relationship. And what do I like to do to express my love? So what love language do I like to speak? And sometimes that's different than the languages that I like to receive.
Yeah, I think that for most people it's the same, but I have known some people that really like to receive words of affirmation, but what they really like is shopping for that perfect gift for somebody.
Yeah.
And I need to get better knowing that both of you guys are gift people. That is like a non-event for me.
No, I'm not gift.
Low. Oh, you aren't gift. Okay.
No,
well, that makes
works
me
of
feel better.
service, quality time.
Okay. That makes me, because you've given me some good, thoughtful gifts, and I just don't reciprocate super well. And
That's fine.
I have a couple friends that are like that. Probably some childhood trauma there that I won't reveal in case my mom and dad watch this.
Well, if you need to practice giving gifts, you know where I live.
Well, and then the first year I got the wonderful scotch, and then last year I got that beautiful drawing of Lewis. And so this year I sent out, I hope, what were thoughtful gifts, and I hope they were subtle in me doing intelligence. I sent books. Some of their favorite books in early editions.
Oh, there you go. I love that. That right back there are my first edition ones, and I love those. Are up on the top.
Yeah,
that's my niece right there. A close second to the first editions.
That's great. Yeah, I can see your Mere Christianity and your Four Loves. And so, for me, I like receiving, or I like to express my love in acts of service. So, like, I go to the refectory and I clear the table all the time. I clear everybody's dishes if I can, and that's in humility, trying to count others better than myself. So that means that I'm more humble than the rest of you. But for me, acts of service, especially in our community, which is all people who are going to be priests, or, most of them are going to be priests. It was hard to try and give in a community full of givers. And so I found that maybe this act of service is a way that I can that I can give. If I offer somebody something, if I cook them a meal, they're like, oh yeah, I'm fine. But if I clear their plate while they're having a conversation, sometimes that goes further to make them feel loved and appreciated. And I've heard that a few times. So that's the love language I think that I most like to speak. I do words of affirmation too, but sometimes they don't stick with folks. What about you guys?
Well, I think you've hit on a key point of the love languages, that it requires a certain amount of adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
That how we might naturally give, we might have to adjust for the person. And, I married somebody who we have quality time in common as a secondary love, but Marie's number one is touch. And I'm pretty sure words of affirmation.
David, rough.
Well, I was going to say, I was part of a group once, and someone said, "But what if her love language is touch and yours really isn't?" And everybody just said, "Offer it up."
Make the sacrifice. Take one for the team.
Fine.
Give one for the team.
but seriously, I mean, and that is probably a distinction that's worth making, because when people first come to the love languages, they think touch, particularly if they're a dude, they go to Venus. And that is not necessarily what that is about. I'd actually say I was raised
between lovers are lovers' kisses. Yeah, you were raised.
I would say I was actually raised very much with touch as a love language between myself, my sister, and my mother. The kind of just as you're walking past somebody, just lightly touching them on the shoulder, or as you're walking past them, we were touchy in that way. But even within that sphere, that's not my natural disposition. And for me to be able to express love in that way with somebody that I'm not related to, which is why I had to marry Marie, that takes some work.
Well, how much of that do you think is societal? Because that seems very British, not to touch.
It certainly is part. It is certainly is part of it. But I've also known English people who are very touchy-feely. But I would say as a whole, the English and the residents of the British Isles are generally less touchy than Americans.
It may be helpful, and I'm sure that you've already thought about this, but as you raise Alexander, you may spend tons of quality time with him, but if Marie sees you touching him, she may read that as love more than quality time.
And that has actually been the funny thing about being a dad. I hold and kiss my son way more than I ever imagined I would. If you guys have seen Scrubs, there's an episode where Dr. Cox refuses to kiss his son. And when I saw that years ago, I was like, oh, am I going to be broken like that as well? But I'm at least pleased to say that while I have many faults, that is not one of them.
I like it. Well, and David, I want to circle back. You mentioned something earlier. One of the beauties of the love languages is the adaptation side of it. Another thing that I think is powerful about it is the way that it just opens our eyes to the idea that there's nothing wrong with another person being different than you. How often, until we understand that someone else might receive or give love in a different way than we do, a sign of a healthy relationship is understanding that differences are okay. Like I have life experiences that have massively adapted how I receive love and how I view the world, and my insecurities, my wounds, my neural pathways. And someone else has completely different ones than me. And we're going to bring those two together. And there's going to be differences. There's going to be messiness and just in general understanding that that's okay. And how do you communicate in that? Now, this is very explicitly in the loving and receiving side of things, but how you communicate within that is really important. So I think it's done wonders to that side to helping it.
Well, and I think that Lewis's thumbnail definition, right, to go out of myself towards the other, is a really good definition to put into effect when I employ the love languages. Let me go out of my love languages and towards the other. Let me find out what their love languages are, and then let me speak them to them. Is kind of, if we're going to use a definition for love, that's a good one to start in terms of employing these love languages.
And it also might result in a little bit of death, because I want to give in the way that I'm naturally giving. Why should I have to give that up for the beloved? Well, this is where charity has to come in, and it goes above and beyond what our natural inclinations, our natural emotions and instincts.
So you don't have to give that up for the beloved, I think, but because my beloved knows that I love to cook and give away food. We give away more food than we ever eat. but that's part of my acts of service, right? And giving gifts. And so she has just resigned herself quite cheerfully to the fact that I'm going to make a big pot of soup that she can never eat, and I'm going to then give it away. I may spend hours and hours and lots of money, you know, making this whatever, and then just give it away. But the fact that even if she doesn't receive those as love languages for her, or she can't even eat the soup because it's got something she's allergic to, she really is so supportive and endorses that in me. And so me allowing me to do that is one of the ways that she is loving towards me. You know, that's an act of service towards me to let me serve others. Yeah.
And I would also say that if we learned anything from the four loves, it's that we don't solve problems by loving anything less. We just love other things more. So if my natural inclination to love Marie is in works of service, because that's how I naturally receive it, and that's the way that my brain works, doesn't mean that I have to do that any less. All it means is that I have to love her more in a way that is not as natural to me.
Yeah, but I mean, part of what I was saying, part of what I was saying is that my beloved loves me by allowing me outlets for those love languages, even if those outlets aren't necessarily her. Right.
And also learning to understand a language that isn't your native language. So Marie will, my heart swells whenever I notice that she has noticed that I've been loving her in the way that is natural to me. So I did the laundry, I cleaned up the house, and she recognizes that and notices that. There's nothing that warms my heart more than that. And we just sort of seem to keep coming back to that idea in the four loves that all of this, the solution to everything is never to love less, but to love more. And it has a multiplying effect.
The biblical word in the New Testament for hatred means to esteem less, right? Unless you esteem your parents less, you can never enter the kingdom of God, not actively hate them. So
I can only imagine, I was mentioning earlier, how I had to adapt to David's lack of words of affirmation. I can only imagine how much he had to adapt to, if you think of how acts of service plays into this. So I spend a lot of quality time with Pints with Jack in terms of prepping for the episode. I read a lot and I take my own notes, but I don't spend any time implementing them into David's organizational structure. And so I can only imagine how much you interpret that as like a lack of an act of service. Like if only I would do that last 30 minutes and put them into your notes. Instead, I keep them in my legal pad and just fill them in the blanks as we're doing our episode. And I can only imagine how much that just frustrates you.
But this circles us back to the point that you made, to the understanding that other people are different. I mean, personally, I think it's insane. Why on earth would you put them on a legal pad when you could put them in an electronic document that are there forever that we can all see? That makes so much more sense to my brain. But you and I are very different people. And to be able to reach the point of acceptance on that score, well, let's just say it saved me an aneurysm.
The reason, by the way, is I get technology massively takes me out of the moment. And so somehow just not having my computer around me and just having a legal pad and a book lets me absorb the chapter. But it is highly inefficient when it comes to transposing it, if I even do, to the notes.
Well, and then in the Four Loves, Lewis says famously, now that Charles Williams has died, I don't have more of Tolkien, I have less of him. Right. And so I think that that's some of what happened at the end of last season. Listeners, you'll know that that we did a lot of kind of episodes where it was just the two of us. But we said, that I certainly said, I like it when it's all three of us. And I think that there was some of that response from the listeners too. And I think that it adds to this place where the different love languages can start to bounce off of each other. David, yes, has this massive structure and it's got the text from the book and then quotes from it in the questions and openings for all of us. And I feel always a little chagrined when I open it up and I see my little purple space. My color is purple, Matt is green, and David is red.
Ours are empty and David's got 10 paragraphs.
David's got all of it there. But I realize that in some ways it is a gift because I've got a ton going on. And I mean, I've got a doctorate I'm working on and outside publications, and and
a
then
book on the Till We Have Faces that you still haven't finished.
But part of it, I was working on it today. This essay that I was talking about charity and clarity, and lots going on. And I'm a Lewis scholar of some stature, but to invest this time, for me, even if I'm not filling it in, I've spent a lot of time gathering this information, which I hope is helpful, in these perspectives, both, religious and literary, and to show up. And you guys are great and flexible, but there's only been one time that I blew us off, and it was for a Brit this season. But hopefully that's quality time that serves.
I'll say one thing too. I don't want to take up too much time, so I know it'd be fun to talk about this in relation to Lewis and maybe some of the dangers of it. But we always joke about Batesian rigidity, but there is really the opposite side, Batesian flexibility. The one thing I have noticed is David has never been the person to set the time. He will always take whatever time Andrew and I end up setting. Honestly, I think every time Andrew, we're like this, and David's like, I can make it work.
That's a good call.
He's got
a good observation
too. I'm like, pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Batesian
flexibility
like
when it comes to
recording.
So, I think that's great. What do you think Jack's love languages were?
Ooh, quality time.
Yeah,
definitely quality time. I don't think you can have golden sessions without quality time.
Yeah. Acts of service.
I was going to say, I don't know if I'm just rejecting myself. His love languages are the same as mine.
No. I think that's true.
That. David, oh no, go ahead, Andrew.
Well, no, he said that he'd spent, he'd often would record in his diary 2 hours pushing pen across paper, answering letters, and none of the cream of the day gone, and none of my own work done. He took it and he gave lots of talks and wrote lots of letters. When in doubt, give more. And so I think acts of service were absolutely part of it for him.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing with the way he would respond to stuff. David's got that same thing. It might be a close third with gift giving, with the amount that he gave away. I don't know if that would fall under it, but the fact that he would donate so much to people in need, that might just be a separate thing. But
no, that was an act of service to give away his money.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know. And in fact, I think that gifts were not his love language. He gave his gardener only 100 pounds. Yeah. Fred Paxford, only 100 pounds in his will. And so he didn't really recognize what kind of money that he had. And I don't think that he thought in that way. He was, people can ask, and rightly so, ask and debate who was Lewis's best friend. But I don't think Lewis had a best friend. I think Lewis was a lot of people's best friend, but I don't think that he had them. I don't think he thought of them in that way. And I think that that giving gifts was probably I don't think he would have been necessarily that thoughtful in terms of, let me get this thing for you. I think that was bound up for him, but, and probably not physical touch. But yeah, I imagine in conversation, words of affirmation. So you hear you expressed by Joy, where the greatest praise he could get from the knock was, I hear you, right? Or there may be something in what you have said. And so I think that if you fought with him and he argued back, I imagine that there were some words of affirmation as well in there.
And not to make this all about me, but that was
because you are the humblest. You can go ahead and make it all.
Well, since Jack and I think are on the same page on this one, that was one of the things that I had to get better at with Marie, and also she learnt to receive. So when I said to her, "That was really good, well done, thank you," naturally that was where that affirmation ended, and she didn't realize, she didn't realize quite how excited I was and quite how grateful I truly was for what had just happened. It's like, but I made all of the statements. It's kind of like Ron Swanson in Parks and Rec. He says, I thanked him and shook his hand. What else does he need from me?
Well, and we Americans, we colonists, don't understand how high praise well done is. Well done is really high praise in understated British society. And I didn't understand that. It was actually Doug Gresham. I got an email from Doug. And when he said, well done, I recognized that as a Britishism, meaning And it comes, I mean, you see the same thing in the scripture. Well done, my good and faithful servant. I mean,
highest praise possible.
I mean, yeah, throwing a parade. Yep.
Someone sent me a TikTok once where this, it said on the screen, this woman was reading it. My husband sent me, "I love you." Instead of saying, "I love you, you're the sweetest person in the world, and I couldn't imagine anyone else besides you." And then she finishes it, "I feel like being a Grinch today." I remember just chuckling.
Yeah.
Well, we've got 5 minutes left. So what connections might you make between the 5 love languages and the 4 loves?
I got something good here.
Oh,
I thought about this ahead of time. I figured we would go somewhere in this direction.
Good.
So it's a combination of maybe connecting it to the 4 loves, and maybe I thought we'd talk a little bit about maybe the dangers of it. So it somewhat goes with both of them. But I think it could be this. You can almost put too much into this idea of, okay, if my partner knows how to pour into me and I know how to pour into them, we're just going to be full of love and our tanks are going to be full. And it's very dependent on the partner. And I think as we've just gone through with the 4 loves, it's not up to your partner to fill your tank. Of course, it's a nice benefit if you guys can be on the same page there, and it can be very helpful on a day-to-day basis. But your tank is going to be filled by divine love, by agape, by our Lord. And so your first thought should be going there to receive that love, not these natural loves per se. And so I think that's how Lewis would look here, like, hey, these are great, but there's something way more that's important to be filling you up. And don't put way too much emphasis that these 4 loves are some silver bullet panacea that will fix everything in a marriage. They're a helpful tool, but in proportion to the real thing, love itself, that's what's going to fill you up.
Yes. And the way God...
Not yes, but.
Yes, and the way God shows his unconditional love for us, especially because he knows our form and remembers that we are but dust, right, is he's going to use his body, which is each other, speaking these 3 natural love languages in order to express his love. I mean, he's going to kind of in some ways come to us in disguise, right? And so, yes, absolutely, your devotional life and your love for the Lord and the Lord's love for you, especially as you cultivate that relationship daily. But some of the ways God is going to really reinforce those things, most of the time, a lot of the time, is going to be through other people. And so that's part of how God's going to show his unconditional love. I think of Lewis, who was going to go get a haircut because he had an appointment in London, and he canceled the haircut. But he felt prompted by the Holy Spirit to go and visit his barber and go ahead with the haircut, even though he wasn't going to go to London. And he walked in the door, and his barber said, "Oh, thank God. I've been praying all day that you would come." Right? And so God showed his unconditional love by Lewis just walking in the door to get his haircut and then to be there. And so I think that the part of the challenge, I think, with 1 Corinthians 13 is that I can't always be patient, and I can't always be kind, and I can't always, rejoice in the good. And God's going to have to. I can't love unconditionally, and I can't receive spiritually unconditional love as the only way that as my only vehicle. So I think that the two are somehow meshed in gears. I don't know, David, weigh in on this.
Yeah, that last bit. That was where I was going with this, that here you're learning a language. And once again, we sort of get back to the very question of what is Lewis doing in the 4 loves? What actually are these loves? Are they different categories of things? Are they the same thing, just working in different circumstances? And I think the way I'd connect the 5 love languages to the 4 loves is the fact that, like the natural loves, at times I'm not going to want to do them. When, obviously, Marie, if you're watching this, you're never annoying. But let's just say that she was being annoying to me. I don't really want to express the love to her in the way that I know she will receive it, particularly if it's a way that is less natural for me. And that is where I need to know that I need help. I need help to supplement these natural loves so that I can communicate my love for her and then ultimately the love of God for her through these works of service, physical touch, words of affirmation, or gifts.
Yeah. Yeah.
Divine gift love.
Mm-hmm. But and expressed in getting over myself and finding out what the other person might want or need. You know, and none of that is lost. None of that is spilled on the floor. Even our failed efforts at love, even our failed approaches, even our misunderstandings, none of that is mistaken, because ultimately, anytime we legitimately go out of ourselves towards another, we're going towards Christ, right? We're loving somebody else for Christ's sake, even if they are our favorite person in the world and they fill our needs so well. That is a gift of Christ, and so it all goes back to Him.
That is a perfect way to end. We are 30 seconds over, but my Batesian flexibility will allow us a few more seconds to cheers to the end of a very fun book.
Yes.
Cheers, gentlemen.
Cheers.
Cheers.